I'm Kotaro Osaza, and before my talk, I'd like to note one thing about pathophysiologies of cardiac and cerebrovascular disorders that was discussed in the previous session. In the Japanese population, hypertension and hypertensive vascular changes are the major pathophysiologies among elderly, especially for the generation of atomic bomb survivors. So rather than atherosclerosis. Of course, atherosclerosis has been increasing among Japanese population, but in the older population, the hypertensive and cardiac disease or cerebrovascular disease is the main. So please consider these differences between Japanese and Western populations when interpretation of the results from atomic bomb survivor studies. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Anyway, here I'd like to talk on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Michiko Yamada, Department of Clinical Studies of RERF, about late life cognitive function about atomic bomb survivors in adult health study. Adult health study is a clinical subcohort of the LSS. A subject has been invited to biennial health examinations at RERF since 1958. Brain is an organ that anatomically develops during the fetus, and the neural network develops until young childhood, then function of higher integration develops later. In accordance with the development, atomic bomb survivors who are exposed to radiation during a specific time, 8 to 15 gestational weeks in their mother's womb, likely developed intellectual disability. Patients who received high-dose radiation therapy at young ages also likely developed impaired cognitive function in their later life. How about atomic bomb survivors? First, we examined atomic bomb survivors who were exposed to radiation at the age of less than 13 years old. Excuse me, less than, not less than they are. Excuse me, 13 years old or older, excuse me. The ahead of cognitive function and dementia study in the AHS, collaborative study of group Nihon C dementia study developed a battery screening test called Cognitive Ability Screening Instrument, CASI. The Nihon C dementia study induced the elderly in Nippon, Honolulu, and Seattle. Nippon means AHS subject in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. CASI contained 10 cognitive domains, and the full score is 100. It is compatible with the mean mental state examination and Hasegawa dementia screening scale, which are common in Western countries and Japan. CASI short form with a full score of 50 was also developed. It includes age-related cognitive domains. A confirmed diagnosis of dementia was conducted for participants with CASI score of less than 75. They were examined by a neurologist, and the neurologist panel determined the diagnosis of dementia and its subtypes with other clinical information, including caregivers' information, neurological examination, and neuroimaging. She is Dr. Yamada and a neurologist panel. In the cross-sectional study in 1992 to 1996, validity of CASI was evaluated. In the screening, 399 patients were suspected with dementia due to CASI score less than 75. On the other hand, 272 patients from 1,653 were selected, randomly selected from those who CASI score with 75 or higher. Another 170 participants were not able to complete CASI, so they were excluded from this validation. Among 399 participants with suspected dementia, 156 were diagnosed with dementia by the neurologist panel, but none was diagnosed with dementia among 272 with a high CASI score. But the 4 patients who were not selected in the 272 but were suspected of cognitive impairment based on disease history, physical exam, and potential reported ADL were diagnosed with mild dementia. If this 272 is represent of the whole high CASI score participants, the sensitivity of this CASI is thought to 100%, and the specificity is thought to around 90%. In the AHS cross-sectional and longitudinal studies for both cognitive function and the dementia planned for the subjects who were 13 years of age or older at the time of the bombings, that is, they were 60 years of age or older at the time of the initial survey in 1992. A cross-sectional study was conducted during 1992 to 96, and the longitudinal studies continued until 2011 at latest. When participants refused the examination by CASI, they were examined by Hasegawa Dementia Screening Test, a simpler battery test, then directly diagnosed by neurologists. I'll introduce the results of cross-sectional analysis on cognitive function in the initial survey. Subjects were around about 3,100 participants with radiation dose by DS86, assuming relative biological effectiveness of 1, a little bit strange, but at this time, RB was assumed as 1 for neutrons. The subjects constitute about 75% of the AHS subject who had undergone biennial examinations. Variables in the model included sex, city, age at the exam, and education and radiation dose. Outcomes is CASI score. This slide shows the distribution of CASI score with age by sex. CASI score decreased with age and steeper in the older ages in both sexes, and the participants with longer education history tends to have a higher score in both sexes. This table shows radiation effects on cognitive function based on CASI score. Impaired cognitive function was defined as a log of 100 minus CASI score. In the multivariate regression analysis included sex, city, and education, and radiation. And the radiation, no effects on decreasing CASI score. Next is the results of prevalence of dementia conducted only for Hiroshima subject. Number of subjects was about 2,200 participants with radiation dose by DSO2, assuming RBE of 10 for neutrons. The subjects also constituted about 75% of the AH subjects. In order to minimize the bias due to non-participation in the AHS examination, 169 subjects who were unable to come to RERF were examined at home or in the hospital or institution where they were residing. Odds ratios of radiation adjusted for sex, age, and education indicated no risk of Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia. Next is the results of longitudinal analysis on cognitive function. About 1,800 dementia-free participants in Hiroshima were followed up until 2011. Radiation dose by DSO2 was used, assuming RBE of 10 for neutrons. Proportion of high dose exposure greater than 1 gray was 15%, and those who were almost non-exposed was 40%. Cache short form was used, and the average number of examinations during follow-up was 3.3 times. And the follow-up period of those who received 2 or more examinations was 8.4 years. Variables in the model were sex, age at exam, education, and radiation dose. During the follow-up, 313 subjects developed dementia. This slide shows the participants' characteristics by radiation dose category. A proportion of gender, mean age at baseline exam, proportion of those who have developed dementia, and the number of exams shows heterogeneity by radiation dose, but not for other factors, including the initial cache score, short form score, or stroke occurrence. This figure indicates estimated cognitive aging trajectories. Cognitive decline became more rapid with increasing age, especially among participants who developed dementia. Radiation exposure indicates no difference in trajectories of cognitive function, cognitive decline. This tendency was not modified by education or sex, although it's not shown here. Next is the results of incidence of dementia in Hiroshima. About 2,000 dementia-free participants were followed during the mean period of 5.9 years. Radiation dose by DSO2 was used, assuming RB of 10 for neutrons. CASI and or IQ code were used for screening, then confirmed diagnosis was made by a neurologist panel as previously. 195 cases of dementia were diagnosed. Tables shows no increased risk of radiation exposure category of 5 to 499 milligray or 500 milligray or higher compared to less than 5 milligray. For any of all dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or vascular dementia. Thus, radiation exposure at the age of 13 years old or older seemed to make no effects on cognitive function or dementia occurrence among atomic bomb survivors. Next step is the results from atomic bomb survivors who were exposed at age less than 13 years old and in utero. Neurocognitive function among survivors who were exposed in childhood and in utero started in 2011. Cassie was administered to 1,100 AHS participants by nurses at routine examinations in 2011 to 2015. Neurocognitive questionnaire was sent by mail in 2011 and 2013 to the 1,300 subjects. NCQ was developed to investigate the effects of cancer therapy on subject neurocognitive function in the childhood cancer survival study. It's a self-reported measurement for 25 problems over the past 6 months to respond with 3 grade. Analyses are currently underway. The latest paper in 2019 reported the result from about 600 non-exposed participants who were 66 to 89 years old at the time of the exam, that is aged 0 to 23 years at the time of the bombings. 20 of 25 NCQ problems were integrated into 4 factors by factor analysis. A higher score indicates poorer perceived neurocognitive function. Factor 1 is thought to represent metacognition. Factor 2 is thought to emotional regulation, and factor 3 motivation and organization, and factor 4 processing speed. All factors are getting poorer when increased age, but the severity was different by factors. That is, emotional regulation seems to be the mildest, and processing speed looks the largest. Other analyses, including association with radiation exposure, are underway. As a summary, studies of cognitive function of AHS participants of atomic bomb survivors who were exposed to radiation at the age of 13 years or older were conducted from early 1990s to 2000s. Cross-sectional studies indicated no effects of atomic bomb radiation exposure for cognitive function or dementia. Longitudinal studies also indicated no effects for either of them. It's possible that these results might be biased to weaken the radiation effects due to healthy survival selection, that vulnerable people might die earlier due to high-dose radiation exposure. Cross-sectional and longitudinal studies of atomic bomb radiation exposure at the age of 13 years or younger are underway. And this is the list of collaborators, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your nice presentation. In contrast to what we expect for the moderate dose range, there was almost a protective effect for Alzheimer's disease. I mean, is that, should we take this seriously, or is this just a coincidence?
Sorry, which results?
Oh, I don't know the slide, but it is, you showed a table. Alzheimer at moderate dose between, I think, was it 5 and 500 millisievert. There was 0.64, the hazard ratios. Oh yeah, there it is. Should we take this seriously, or is it coincidence?
I think these are the non-significant. So you mean this? Yes. Incidental.
Other
we can
questions?
get it incidental.
So if no more questions, thank you, Kotaro.